Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Today, we have a special guest, Adam Sporka, who is quite a interesting person. He's a mix of like different disciplines, ranging all from like game audio design to software engineer to a researcher. And one of like his biggest project was Kingdom Come Deliverance, where he did the music middleware, which drives the music behind the game. He also teaches at the Charles University in Prague, and he's like speaker all over the world. He has been in Germany on a DevCon in Cologne, in Reboot Dubrovnik, and GDS in Prague. And without further ado, I will give word to Adam.
Thank you very much. Hi guys. I hope that everyone can see me and hear me. Please not if everything is fine.
Yeah, everything is okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Hello everyone. At this point, I normally ask in my audience like how much of musicians they are, like how many musicians are in the audience, but today I don't think that I can really do that. But anyway, so let me start with the question with this thing. When people understand that certain things are complete, when an artwork is complete, right? It's like, what is the point that a piece of art is done, you know? And what effort you need to put in order to get there. So, you know, like there's a difference between, let's say, detailed or oil painting versus pixel art, right? I'm not saying that, let's say, pixel art is less of an art than detailed oil painting, but certainly somehow it's like easier to actually make, I guess. And chiptune is somehow similar to that, because, you know, we will let's say talk about some limitations of chiptune, and let's say why we can say that it's easier to make chiptunes than other styles of music when it comes to, you know, like video game music. But it's very important that but there's only one thing. Another important thing is, let's say that that the style matches, right? So that we have some kind of a visual style and some audio style, and they both need to match. So we have to have some kind of a genre consistency. So because if we have music which doesn't really correspond, or sounds which do not correspond to the visuals of a game, people will try, let's say, like the audience, the players will try figuring out why it doesn't check out, why it doesn't really match. So maybe the authors wanted to point something out, right? But if they did not want to point anything out, people will still notice this difference, and they will still search for meanings which probably are not there, right? So, and then you get all sorts of interpretations of your game which wasn't really supposed to be there to begin with. So so yeah, so it's very important to match the style of audio to your visuals. So, and obviously, as I was saying, it's for a lot of indie developers, going for a pixel art is the obvious choice, because it doesn't take too much resources to actually get things which are done, which are understood as being done, right? So another thing which I would like to point out at this point, there is you know, one of my backgrounds is old music, is old, like a medieval music, and, you know, like early Renaissance, you know, late medieval music and stuff like that. And I know lots of musicians who are into historically informed performance. What that is, it's essentially these people are trying to figure out how to make sure that their music is sounding authentic somehow, you know, that they have the right instruments, they have the right tunings, they have the right ornamentations, you know, like those little let's say trills in your melody, stuff like that. That you do right phrasing, right? I mean, like that you start your phrases and end them like that. You like change the tempo gradually. You have some kind of a some volume changes over time and stuff like that. And honestly, retro gamers are interested in exactly the same thing. We are not talking about medieval times. We're talking about, let's say, late 20th century, but it's also somewhat historically informed performance, right? So when you want to do music which looks like this, which corresponds to this manuscript in the 13th century, you probably want to be using instruments like these, right? And this is what we did in Kingdom Come Deliverance when medieval group Bacchus was using these like instruments while we were recording the music. And so when in Rome, like Rome, it's supposed to be pun. Now you are supposed to be laughing. I hope you're laughing, because if you're not, it's like super awkward. Yes, get it, like Rome, because we are like cartridges and old never mind. So when you have visuals like this, you definitely want to use a device or tools, devices or tools which look like this. So chiptunes. Chiptune is music or sound effects. I have this kind of a broader definition of this thing, which music which is created by dedicated audio circuits. Especially in 1970s and 1980s hardware, because then once you got PCM, or once you got like a digital audio signal, things are no longer chiptune per se somehow, because then this is what the modern situation looks like. We have let's say 99% of contemporary games are utilizing PCM audio playback. Essentially, you have a CPU. There is somewhere in the storage there is like a complete audio signal, and it doesn't really matter whether it's music or some sound effects. It's like those are recorded, and they are pretty much played back as they are through some digital audio converter. Of course, like it's slightly more complicated than this, but as a conceptual overview, this is enough. Chiptunes are different. Chiptunes are that, again, you have some kind of a storage of music and sounds and stuff like that, but you don't have the signal. You don't have the complete audio signal. You only have tone parameters and, let's say, pitch of the tone, type of the signal, volume of the signal, and these parameters go to a dedicated hardware, which like it was a thing. It's still a thing, but it's not really used anymore too much. And these synthesizers, or this synthesizer, then synthesized audio, and then you were able to hear it. So chiptune is based on description of audio rather than the audio signal itself. It's very, very important. It's generated on the fly, and it's somewhere between audio playback and MIDI. MIDI, the musical interface protocol, where you press keys on one side, and these keys and these key presses are translated into messages, which then control synthesizer somewhere in your studio, and this is how you actually. And this is how you actually like play the music. What is nice about chiptunes? There's always some kind of some minor variations of them. There's always when you have a piece of audio, it never sounds exactly the same, right? So I did like how many, like seven hits here, and when you listen closely, those sounds, those hits would be always slightly different, because I'm using some kind of noise generator, which was utilized to generate this sort of audio. So there are sometimes you just get some neat glitches there. I will disconnect this thing just in case. There are some neat glitches in there. Sound feels somehow more alive, somewhat, because sometimes you just get some weird phase shifts and stuff like that. So different channels cancel each other only at that point. Never before, never again. You know, these kinds of things. So yeah. So the pros of chiptune music is that the CPU only handles the tone changes. Then the synthesizer does the actual audio generation. It's not the so it's not the CPU who does any signal whatsoever. So there is definitely a small storage footprint, which is good. It was very important when you had a computer which had, let's say, 64 kilobytes of RAM. That's exactly what you needed. Like small footprint, really. Music is described by note, which is nice because the speed of the music playback could be altered on the fly. So, when you have, this was used very often on Nintendo Entertainment Systems, for example, that music would go faster and slower depending on how the situation in the game evolved. So it was a really cheap way how to do adaptive music. And also playback can be nonlinear. So since you are deciding, since the signal doesn't really exist, it's being generated on the fly. There also could be the way how it's being generated could be manipulated on the fly, and so the playback could be nonlinear. You could have branching compositions and stuff like that. And again, people were using this thing. For example, there was a really simple nonlinear playback of music on Atari 2600, which was this visual console, this TV console back in the late 70s, and the game Pitfall. It was really revolutionary in many ways, actually. And also you have some cons, right? So you only have so the cons of chiptune music is that you have a fixed palette of sounds. So most sounds would sound similar somehow. Most music would sound similar because one hardware unit would have typically just those types of signals which were supported. So for example, Atari 800 had a square wave and a bunch of noises which were also somehow linked to square wave. So that's all you have, right? Another disadvantage is that people usually had to work with a fixed tempo grid because the players usually were linked to some underlying hardware cycles. Most often it was the vertical black interrupt. So when you have a TV screen and you have lines going like this, like 50 times per second or 60 times per second, depending on whether you are in Europe or in the US. When the scan line, when you had to start drawing another frame, that would be the vertical black interrupt, and you had some amount of time to actually compute certain things, and also lots of things you would be typically triggered there, including an update of the state of the audio. So okay, so old school chiptune, what does it do? As I was saying, right? So we have some super basic signals, and I'm sure that you have heard those. Like we have a square wave, we have a triangle wave, we have we have different kinds of pseudo-random noise, and I'm sure that you have heard these kinds of things all over. Like this is a square. This is a nice square wave. Let's say we're gonna do a C4, a tone of C4, and really that's kind of slow. So this is the square, and so on and so forth. Right. This is a triangle. They don't do triangle here. Never mind. Doesn't really matter. Sawtooth was another basic signal. Right. So depending on what your hardware was actually capable of doing, you would have different kinds of those basic sounds which were available for you. So implications for music. You would have you would have to care less about the sound design because there was fewer things you could do with the sound, and you were focusing more on music itself. So you were writing music, right? You were not really figuring out how to make the bass drum sound more punchy, and how to make the snare, how to make sure that the snare cuts through, through the mix, and that the bass is whatever the bass does, because you had just one type of bass, and you had, let's say, 3 types of bass drum that you could do. So you didn't really care, which is liberating in a way, right? It's just like when someone in pixel art, gives you 16 colors and tells you, well, this is what you do. This is what you have. Your resolution is 120 by 80, and you have 16 colors. Go figure, right? So it was more about the melodies and harmonic progressions. Well, with certain limitations, as we will see, later. It was less about how the audio sounds, and so also most music sounded very, very comparable. So which is actually for better or worse. But when no one is, like a lot of people who listen to chiptune sounds, they would be like chiptune music. They would be like, oh, it sounds like Mario. Well, everything sounds like Mario, right? Because like every music sounds like music. And since the music is like chiptune, and most likely that's like these like iconic games were the ones which everyone knows. Everyone knows also their soundtrack, and their soundtrack is like the old school chiptune. So everything is going to sound like that, of course. So yeah, so it's always about. It was always about being cheap. To make a square wave generator, you just needed really a small amount of components. You have there's a bunch of possible circuits that you could do, but all of them have something in common. They have just a few components, and so they could have been done cheap back in the late 1970s, right? So. Oh yeah, so that was one thing. So another limitation, as I was saying, was the timing. So the music was often controlled in discrete time intervals. So very often it was something like vertical black interrupt or something like that. So you couldn't do arbitrary tempo. You only had to have, let's say, specific tempos which you actually could choose from. So you couldn't do like, let's say, smooth speeding up, smooth slowing down, or anything like that. So, and also if a computer is an instrument used in the band, the tempo has to be set based on it, right? Because there is no way, again, like no MIDI, nothing. So what I mean by that, let's assume that we would like that we have a 30 FPS resolution. Well, it would be, let's say, 60 on DSC, but let's say that we want to do that we have 30 frames per second, and on each frame we can just do something with the music. So we have, these are the frames. This is 1 second, right? So if we want to do 120 BPM, there are 2 quarter notes to 1 second, right? So 1 2 1 2, right. So there are obviously 4 quarter notes and 8 16th notes. There is one thing, they don't align. They don't align with your frames. So they will always sound somehow stuttery. So this is how it's supposed to sound, right? And this is how it is going to sound, right? And that's it. This is what you have to deal with. If you wanted to have a specific tempo, you had to do something like this, or you just chose a tempo which actually worked. So for example, 112.5 BPM perfectly works at 30 FPS, right? So when you have 30 FPS, one frame lasts 0.0333 seconds, which means that let's say if we consider that 1 quarter note is 14 frames, then we end up being 128 BPM. One quarter note is 16 frames. That's 112 BPM and stuff like that. And sometimes you can evenly subdivide. Sometimes you cannot really evenly subdivide anything. Of course, depending on your system. NTSC and PAL were the most important TV let's say format, and they determined how many frames per second you had. PAL had 50 half frames. So this kind of a update would happen once every, like once every 1/50th of a second, or when you, if you had NTSC, you would have 60 frames per second, 60 half frames per second somehow. Okay, another thing, you would have a number of channels which was limited, right? So you had 4 channels on Atari 800 XL, you had 3 channels on Commodore 64, you had 2 channels on Atari 2600, you had 1 channel on PC Speaker. So that was it. So you couldn't really do orchestral music with this, even if for some reason you would be fine with all your violins sounding like, sounding like sawtooth waves, and all your flute sounding like square waves and stuff like that. You simply would not have enough channels to actually play the entire orchestra. It was just impossible. So there was one neat trick how to do that, and that was like I'm gonna make this slower. You could rapidly alter the sound, the tones of the sound. Let me just show you a little example here. I'm gonna I was being too careful with my volume. Obviously, this is not any platform. This is just a piece of music which sounds like a pseudo chiptune kind of a thing, in Reaper, right? So when you have these tones rapidly alternating, you have the feeling that there is a dot chord, there's a concord happening. Right, so and people were using this thing like extensively, right? And if you could let's say simulate, I don't know what, like 1 or 2 extra channels per channel. If you were careful with that, it would be actually a nice way of doing this thing. So this is the reason why so many chiptunes would have rapid arpeggios. This is the reason. Tuning limitation. That's another thing. This is my favorite. This is actually what determines the color of the true chiptune. So tuning was often done using integer frequency division. So what do I mean by that? So the hardware, the synthesizer, the piece of hardware which was responsible for generating the audio, was driven by some base frequency, and the base frequency would be, I don't know, let's say one of the basic base frequencies on Atari 800 was something like 65 kilohertz, right? So you would have a clock 65 kilohertz, and this clock was then divided by 2, by 3, by 4, by 100, by 200, and that would be your square wave. That would be what would determine the actual wait, I have probably 2 things happening at the same time. I didn't want to do that. Right. So this thing. So that's the result of dividing this frequency, which would be super high. You would not be able to hear it, into something which is audible, but when it's like super out there, right? So this would be like, those would be very, let's say, low numbers. So low division numbers, low numbers, low denominators, right? And when you go higher, you would get something low. Eventually, something like, right? So okay, so let's look at that. Let's look at this technique and let's see how it gets limited. Let's say that we want to do A4, which is like a one-line A, like a chamber A. Sometimes different languages are calling this note a different thing. And let's work with the 64 kilohertz base frequency of Atari 800 XL, and we're looking for an integer by which we need to divide this thing to get roughly this thing. And this is an integer, and this is a constant. What we end up with is that, well, it's not going to be precise. So we either can get 440, or for 437, right? So we will either be a little bit too sharp or a little bit too flat. And that was it. That's it. And different tones would have different amount of detuning. Those are the numbers for the subdivision of the frequency, right? So this is the 8-bit control, but on Atari. So you would start down. So this could not be bigger than 255, which means that that lowest note in this 8-bit mode on Atari was C3, which is this one, right? So you couldn't go lower in this basic mode. So that was the lowest note you had to do. If you wanted to go lower, you had to sacrifice one channel. So you either could have 4 voices, and in this range, or you could have, let's say, one bass note which could go below, but you had to sacrifice one voice. So you only had 3 voices at that point, right? So you could have, let's say, two voices, which would be full range and full and everything nice, but you couldn't play anything else. So really, like, it was all about trade-offs, and the trade-offs were really difficult sometimes. Well, so what is happening here? Since these numbers are, like, obviously as the subdividing the subdivision number decreases, the intervals in hertz are getting taller, and essentially actually no, what I mean, sorry, you couldn't play precise G6. You couldn't. It would be minus 30 cents below the tone. By the way, a cent is a unit where zero cents is like you are right on the dot when it comes to it. That's like the precise tuning. 100 cents, which would be somewhere here, that would be 1 semitone higher. So if this is one note, then this note would be 100 cents higher, and this would be 100 cents lower, right? Okay, so F#6 was 30 cents higher than it was supposed to be. So when you are actually playing certain things, and you have this mode activated, different chords would have different feel. Right? So this is totally out of tune. So this is out of tune. This one is actually quite nice. Right? It's actually super sharp. It's actually super nice. And so, and once you get super high, this is not a half tone. This is definitely not a half tone. It's more like a 3/4 of the tone. So yeah, so you didn't really have much of a, let's say, Western tuning here. So sometimes you could actually do really super nice things with this. Sometimes you all you had to do was like just go in the corner and just and cry, because you just couldn't do any. You couldn't like do that chord in that sort of like you have to choose your harmonies. You have to choose which harmonies are going to sound nice, which harmonies are going to sound awful. And that was Atari 800 XL. It was way worse on Atari 2600. Atari 2600, which was well, it had like 16 different notes, different kinds of sounds, right? And you only had 32 pitches per type of sound. So let's see. So if I want to, so let's say that we want to play some melody on this thing. So this would be the lowest tone we have. volume. So you have to know these numbers. This would be 31. This would be 20. What? 30, 28, 27. And as you get higher, your ability to actually find the tones on the scale would be impossible. All the way up until here. Those are not tones anymore. Those are like, right? So when people were composing for this instrument or for this computer, some people had this toy piano with some keys like torn out, you know, so that you actually could like, you know, so that you wouldn't be distracted by tones you are really like you know, cannot really play on this thing because they were not even supported. So careful with harmonies. That's the thing. This is the implication. And then you had Commodore 64, which had audio hardware which was far superior from all other things, all other devices. There would be a 3-voice analog synthesizer which would have pretty much, you know, contemporary architecture even today somehow, you know. And it had very, very precise tuning, and it still is being in use really. And so that's something. That's really something nice. Okay, another thing is you would have you know, volume articulation when you wanted to actually play something, when you wanted to play some like different, like the same sound in different volumes. Atari 800 XL, for example, only had 4 bits, which enabled you to specify the volume. I'm going to sweep from the highest to the lowest, right? And you will hear this effect. Can you hear those steps? You know, like it's not like a smooth thing. It goes like, you know, in steps. I'm going to make it slower so that it's like more visible or more audible. And it's all linear. That's another thing, right? So this is a linear decrease of volume, not logarithmic, which means that going from the silence to the first step above silence is much bigger step, like perceptually much bigger step than going from the loudest to the one below. And that's what it was. That's what you have. All right, so anyway, so if you want to do true chiptune, you have to render the music and sound effects as authentic as possible, including these kinds of things. Well, but then you look at Untitled, for example, and which is a pixel art game, and then you see that it's not really a pixel art game. It's more like a quasi pixel art, right? So all of a sudden you see this ball, which is also pixel art, but you see that the grid of this pixel, of these pixels is like kind of like slanted, right? It's not parallel, it's slanted, and the pixels are much bigger than the rest of the thing. So yeah, so the lesson learned. If you want to play chiptunes, well, play true chiptunes, except for times when you don't. And actually, the first letters of this rule, incidentally, are they make up this nice little village in mid Wales. No, actually, no, it doesn't. It was a joke, and I hope that you're laughing right now, because if not, well, actually, this is actually cool because I can make really, really terrible puns and really terrible jokes, and I don't see you cringing. This is awesome. I like this. Yeah, so play true chiptunes except for times when you do not. Anyway, so those limitations, actually choices now, because we can choose to actually, we want to have limited number of channels. And we can choose to have limited number of like limited tuning and stuff like that. But all right, so we can have that each audio object can have its own synthesizer, right? Why not, right? So we have let's say 5 spaceships in the game, and each spaceship can have its own like virtual Atari 800 synthesizer. You know, we can work with a continuous tempo grid. We can go down to sample precision because it is us who is in charge. Well, actually, in this particular thing, we will probably be worse off than we were back in 1970s because we will rely on having your engine calling the update, and you probably do something in the update. So there is something which would, you know, to be aware of here, because when you were timing something with using vertical black interrupt, you couldn't just go wrong. You know, that was that. But now it's not really guaranteed that you know, like, of course, like different engines do different things, but when you rely on synchronizing your sound to your FPS, you will be probably disappointed. Just saying. Anyway, you can go crazy with the waveforms. Of course, you don't need to stick with the hardware imposed square waves and fixed noise generators and stuff like that. You can have your engine's audio pipeline, right? So you can actually bring in some EQ, you can bring in some echo, some reverb, you know, on the top of your sounds, which you generate yourself. Okay, there's one thing that I never mentioned, and that is that what I was talking about so far was the, let's say, old school chiptunes, like old school, and this is like less old school. It's like a new school. I don't know, probably not. This is like what I was talking before. There was like late 1970s, early 1980s. This is more like late 1980s kind of the technique. Modules. So a module is a format which was introduced on, if I'm not mistaken, on Amiga 500. And Amiga 500 was using this specific format of music, which it would be like a collection of PCM samples, a PCM sample like a regular, like a short snippet, like a short recording of a recording of a drum, a recording of a hi-hat, a recording of a bass and stuff like that. And it would be available for you to play. And then there was this music matrix, which was actually why am I not showing this thing? So this is Vojta Nedvěd's. This is an excerpt from TV Man, 2006 video game by Newly, CRS, and Raced. And this is what I like about this game is that they squeeze the entire soundtrack into just one module, one module, and when you and then you would just skip to different parts, different orders, and you would hear different levels. So here, you know, for example, so the first order would be the start of the game. So then the player would start here, and you would hear the opening of the thing, and then you needed to play something else. So you would use your player to skip there. So essentially here what you have, those are channels, and you can have one tone playing on each channel, and those are parts, those are moments in time. They are equally spaced for in most cases, and you could start a note, or you could apply some kind of an effect, so like a volume, for example, or a vibrato or something like that, depending on the type of the module you would be using. And the nice thing is that, as I was saying, you can change the playback tempo, so you can essentially do the same thing which was heavily used on Nintendo Entertainment System, that you would change the playback speed. You can switch on and off the tracks and stuff like that. You can reorder reorder the patterns, and this way you could play nonlinear music, etc. and etc. So we have multiple approaches to chiptune audio. We could be pre-rendering things. So essentially you compose and design and you render on original hardware or using emulators, and then you play it in your video game as like just like in any modern day PCM audio. This is kind of a this is the lazy chiptune approach. Or you could use modules, this technique that I have been just showing. So you can just compose things and then render using module player, like in real time and at runtime. And you could control tempo, you could control position, these kinds of things. Or you could go super hardcore. And this is the thing that I was like spending most of my time on, because that's I am that kind of nerd. And so you would compose and design, and then you would render that audio using some kind of an emulator, which is at runtime. And you would have full control over the entire process, which is very nice sometimes. Well, it's so Rock told me that it's supposed to be like 45 minutes, so I'm kind of getting closer to the end. So let me just give you a little tip here. You can actually write your own synthesizers in Unity, and it is very simple. So you just create a mono behavior derived object, and you set it up. You just say you just figure out what was the sample rate which your system is set for. This is very important, because then you need to recompute certain things. You need to know what your sample rate is when you are this low level. And then this is the core of it. So you essentially, this is on audio filter read, which is being called whenever a chunk of data is needed for your by your audio interface to play. So this on audio data filter read gives you an array of floats, and you just fill them up with thing, and that's it. And this is how you make some crazy sounds. I actually have this little demo here. So I have this. So these two sounds, even though they sound, well, they both sound like some sort of an explosion, but they sound somehow different. Even though the same technique has been used to do both of them. What I'm using, this is the synthesizer, by the way. This is all it takes. So there's this routine which is called get next sample, and when asked, it just computes the next sample to give to your audio filter read routine here, right? So what it does here, it has some kind of a duration which is set by the host. As a number of samples it needs to produce, and then there is this shift register, and this shift register is actually a very nice thing. When you this generates this very typical 8-bit-ish sound effect. Is, well, you have a shift register with 5 bits, and when you take this bit and this bit, and you calculate a XOR, and then you do an inversion like a NOT, and you put this thing in. So then you shift thing, and then you put this thing in here, this bit in here, and that's it. That's all there. That's all it is. This was one of the this is one of the noise generators on Atari, and it does this beautiful and very iconic sound. This is the essence of 8-bit sound effects to me. It's just beautiful, really. And again, like when you, and since this is something which was a quasi stochastic, when every time you run it, it sounds slightly different. Those cracking sounds, they as they get sequenced, sometimes they sound, sometimes they don't. Right? right? So so every instance is slightly different just by that. So I think I will share this thing somewhere. Like if you guys would like to like explore this thing, or maybe like get some inspiration from this thing. Really, it's I'd be happy if you do. All right, so I think that was it for my talk about chiptunes and about sound effects. And people usually end with some. Well, you are more than happy to listen to some of my Atari 800 XL tunes that you find on Spotify. It's called For Ember, and I've released it like some time ago, but I think it's still okay. So this is it. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take your questions now.
Thank you, Adam. This was a very, very informative and very like in-depth guide to chiptune. And yes, as Adam said, I will read or like collect answers on a YouTube comments, or also in the Zoom. If you want, you can like unmute yourself and ask Adam directly. And yeah, we can wait a bit, like for the questions. And yeah.
Oh wow, there are people. Yeah, I also opened the YouTube page. Okay, so no questions so far. That's good.
Yeah, maybe I could ask like a few questions.
Please,
while we are like collecting other ones. I was interested. Like, did you like? This is like two questions, I guess. Did you make like any music for like the old school like chiptune games, like for the Atari or like Amiga or Commodore?
I was only a kid at that point, and I wasn't really programming anything. So no. So I wrote a bunch of like chiptunes for Atari, and it was rendered on the original hardware, right? But it wasn't used in any game. No.
Okay.
Actually, yes. The first video game that we shipped, it was really a long time ago. It's such a long time ago that I don't even want to disclose the year when that happened. It was using XM modules, yes. So it was this kind of a new chiptune kind of a thing, but it didn't really sound like that, because it didn't sound like old computers anymore somehow. Well, they are old now. They were not old then. They were like super new, because you know what I mean.
Yeah, and like, okay, so I want to ask like the next question, but like yeah, I was asking, like, was it how do you like approach, like, because you were saying like all these like different like characteristics, and like how it differs from the how to say, like the traditional music or traditional composing, but are there any like special like ways or like special like methods how to like compose, like, or like how to like make chiptune music?
Honestly, it's just it's more like about the sound and about those limitations that I mentioned, right? That you really have to be careful about let's say playing sustained harmonies there, because sustained harmonies would be an issue, because when you play, let's say, full chord, and you somehow hit the combination of tones which doesn't really work, you are punishing yourself, right? So doing this thing is fine, but playing these three tones at the same time, there's just pure punishment somehow, right? If you go here, and then you do, it's okay, because everything is like nice and in tune. This is ugly. This is nice, right? So these kinds of things which you have to be aware of. So it's more like about I think it's more about, let's say, a trial and error. You essentially are composing music for a musician that is not really a good musician somehow, and you know that the musician will not get any better. That's what you have somehow. So you have to write for the for that music, for that musician specifically, so that you don't run into a wall, right? And I see DDL Blue asked whether I ever tried Renoise. Actually, I have seen it, and I'm a big fan because my colleague from Warhorse Newly is actually using it very often. But I haven't really done anything in that. I use actually Resto Music Tracker for my Atari endeavors, because it has a really nice emulation of the Atari hardware. So that's what I would be using. FM synthesis, yeah. I don't know how to pronounce your name, so I will not. PHRTZA is asking whether FM synthesis is also considered chiptune. Honestly, chiptune is not really defined in any way somehow. I think it would be chiptune because it's like a dedicated hardware. I think it would be, I guess. I didn't include that. It's to me, it's something which came like later, and of course, lots of limitations that I mentioned are not so pronounced there, because you would have some sort of you had multiple channels that you could use. You had more channels that you could use on Adlib. The tuning was much better. The signals were different though. Everything was more like sine wave based, so it was kind of round. So I think this is also a nice thing, that each hardware, each platform had some kind of a characteristic. So Atari was just a punch in the face kind of a thing, right? Whereas Adlib was more like this kind of a nice little, like a cartoony kind of like a candy of music, right? Like candy bars of music. Whereas Atari was like a, I don't know, something, the opposite of a candy bar of music. You know, you know what I want. You know what I mean. So yeah. So yes. Any more questions?
I guess I can also like ask one in between. You were saying like for like the old hardware, right? They were going like this scan lines, right? Like from top to bottom.
Yes.
Do you maybe know like how's this kind of like music state stored, right? I mean, like, because like let's say like if you start everything from top to bottom and like I don't know, like somebody like hits somebody, like I don't know, with sword, like how would you detect this? Or like would you like play sound before it was actually rendered, or like or how did you like sync like the music state and the rendering state together? Like
it would be more like how you probably wrote your own audio playback routines somehow, and I think you would somehow determine that some kind of a sound needs to play, and then you would just start playing it somehow. I think you had some kind of a table of frequencies, those subdivision numbers that you would play in a row. So it was some kind of a sort of like a playlist of things that you wanted to do, and that would generate your sound effect. But it really depends on what was on what how the particular audio routines were written, right? So yeah. Do you always generate sounds, or do you use samples too? Well, it all depends on what kind of music I'm making. If it's chiptunes and I get to let's say synthesize them on my own, I would like to synthesize them on my own. Yes, because it's more like it's kind of a truer to the original thing. Of course, it's not possible always, but yeah, I'm using my own BSDs and my own synthesizers and I don't use hardware, like original hardware, all that much, to be honest, because it's kind of cumbersome. Even though I do keep my Atari 800 XL around, because it is a beautiful piece of equipment, and it still works and everything. I touch wood, and but yeah, if there's a choice of between generating my own audio and playing back something, I would rather generate it. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions?
Maybe one question. Also, going to the continuing this question from Micha. like how much space would you like save up if you would like auto-generate or like generate in runtime or like play samples? Was that like a big difference or like, especially on the old hardware?
Oh, on all well, well, okay. So you have let me just do a little thing here. So you had 65 bytes of RAM in theory. Some of it is in system. It's like used up by system, right? So maybe you had, if you were lucky, you could have something like, let's say 40 kilobytes of byte, 40 kilobytes of data. If you were really splurging, you would be using 4-bit audio, which means you could store two samples into 1 byte. So you would have 80,000 samples at your disposal. And you usually would not be able to play more than, I don't know, let's say 8 kilohertz, maybe 8 kilohertz, 8,000 samples per second. So this was your sample rate. This was your capacity, right? So you could do 10 seconds of audio. That's all you had, and you would have 0 space left for the rest of your thing. So usually it was very, very rare to be used in any capacity. Maybe some sort of like drums or like very specific like PCM audio was used on these machines. Most of it was generated. Most of it was synthesized because you simply did not have the capacity.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah. Right. So who's next? Or maybe that was it, I guess. I think whoever wanted to ask their questions, they already have. So what do you think? What do you think, Rob?
I think that's it. Yeah, we can slowly finish. I think we can finish. Like, I think at this point, I will. Wait.
Okay. Tone samplers are often really fraction of second long. That would be okay, right? Yes. So if you wanted to do some sort of like wavetables and something like that, you could do that. It was very, very rare because it would be, like I don't really remember encountering this thing in the video games from that era too much, because I think it wouldn't really get you anything super spectacularly different than what you would be able to achieve using the standard things. So I think those waveforms, that's more like this era of modules. So waveforms, that would be like 1980s. Right, not 1970s. That would be like late 1980s, early 1990s, maybe. Yes, in modules, that was you're absolutely correct. DDL Blue, it was used extensively in the modules. Yes. Yeah, and yeah, and you normally would have some sort of like a sample, and then the sample would have some kind of a loop point. So so you would be playing it from here to here, and as you hit the end, you would come back to the loop, so that you could have like an onset, and then there would be some sort of like a volume envelope, right? So you would have so you would like play the sound, and eventually you would just start reducing the volume, and that would be it. Yeah. I noticed that some mods have used samples that included harmony, a nice trick to make up the low number of channels. Yes, that was definitely it. That would be useful when you had four channel modules, and yes, you could just bake in. You could bake in minor and major chords and stuff like that, and And yeah, and people were using this thing extensively. That is absolutely true.
I think we can wait a little bit more, or but yeah, thanks for the question, guys. They're really
thank you
really
very much. Yes. I've seen XM by Nule that even had arpeggio in samples, so he could do slides with them. Yeah, Nule is a really a connoisseur of all these kinds of things. So yeah, no connoisseur, whatever the pronunciation is. Oh, it's recorded now. Oh my God, never mind. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can finish here, and I will stop streaming. But yeah, we can still stay in the Zoom call for like some like chatting or meeting. And thanks everybody for like stopping by for the live stream.
Thank you.
And that's it.
Yep. Thank you. Bye bye.
See you next month.
Yep. See you.